What is up, everybody, and welcome to a short explanation of what I have found about my Xbox Elite Series 2 controller. So, I recently got it. I've only had it for like 2 or 3 days, maybe, and I immediately realized that there's a lot of there's a lot of dead zone in the middle. There's quite a big of a gap. And I think a lot of other players have been commenting the same thing. Anyways, I'm gonna tell you what I did. First of all, I like a very high and stiff thumbstick to write. So, as you can tell, I have modded it a bit myself. It's still detachable. It's still a regular thumbstick beneath. I just made my own top part. Anyway, the fact that I like it stiff meant that I could open the entire controller up. I'm not gonna show you now because honestly it's a bit of a hassle getting it open, because if you watched other tutorials you'll know that the entire top part clicks off. It comes off just like the side of the handles on the Elite Series 1. So what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to take some small piece of plastic like a guitar pick. I used a guitar pick and then a little plastic bed that I just found laying around, and then I used that to work my way all around until I could click it open. There's a bit of adhesive right about here, here, and here, and here, so it's gonna resist coming off a little bit, but if you just work your way slowly but steadily, it's gonna work. Okay, nevertheless, so once I've gotten into the controller, I wanted to remove the plates so I could see the mechanism below, right? Now, some people have figured out that they come off by screwing them off. Um, you can't just pop them off like the old controllers. You need to unscrew them. And to do that, I recommend that you use the tension adjustment tool and you twist it to the left, like counterclockwise, all the way to the loosest setting, and then you just keep going. It's gonna feel awkward. I know you might be a little bit nervous because it's an expensive controller, but that seems to be the best way, because that's how I did it after watching a couple of videos with people tearing theirs apart and actually breaking some parts inside them. I realized that the tension adjustment screw kind of seems to be on its own, and then you have the other screw below on the mechanism, and by unscrewing this one first, I think you loosen it up a little bit. So use the tool you got, go to the loosest setting, then just keep going left, and once you feel it becomes looser, then you can start twisting on the plate itself, either with your fingers just like that, or you use the knob if you put one on like that, and then you just screw on the knob. That's, by the way, one of the easiest way to get it back on, because that can also be a bit of a hassle. Use the thumbstick, put it on, and then try to screw it on straight. Make sure you screw it on straight, because I started screwing on my right one a little bit crooked, and it damaged a part of the screw a little bit. Not much, it still works just fine, but a little bit. I don't like that. Alright, anyway, what I did to remove a little bit of the dead zone in the middle of the gap was that I actually used a bit of super glue. Now listen carefully, because before, when you had a dead zone, that was because that the plastic knob that came out of the mechanism below had a little gap between it and this plate and the hole into this plate. That is not the case anymore because this screws on. So instead of screwing this open, I'm just going to show you. Imagine that this is the mechanism below, right? So here you have that little plastic knob coming out, right? You recognize that if you've ever opened a controller, and then you have like a little ring, blah, blah, blah. So this is attached to the joystick like so, right? That's beautiful, right? Well, now this is not just, you don't just push it on. It has a screw right here. So you screw it on. Now, the reason that they come with quite a bit of a dead zone from the factory, and the reason that you can't really do too much about it is because the fact that they have made it adjustable, the tension, means that there is now a little spring-loaded pin that comes up from this mechanism. So this is the screw. I'm enlarging it a bit so it's easier to see. This is the entire, part below the mechanism. And here you have a tiny little pin. It's super, super tiny actually. Well, it pokes out a few millimeters, but it's very thin. Now this is spring-loaded, so if you push down on it, it's gonna go down into this part, right? And if I'm not completely retarded, that should mean that down here you have a spring, right? And when you twist this one to the right, it's going to be going down into the controller, pushing this pin, tightening this spring, making the tension, making the thumbstick stiffer basically. Now, if you have it on the high setting, you can feel that just a little bit of that dead zone goes away. There's a little bit of less of a gap, but it's not enough. Still on the high setting, for me at least, I play a lot of FPS games, it's still too much. So what I actually realized was that I can push this pin down, this one, more than what is possible using the tension screw, right? Because obviously Microsoft doesn't want you to be able to screw it all the way down as tight as you can, because then you might break your controller, and that's bad for them, right? So the screw has a stop. You can only go 2 clicks to the right, and then you're in the highest setting, but that isn't all the way down. So what I did was I took a tiny, tiny little metal kind of pin, a metal rod, a tiny one, that actually is so tiny that it could go inside here, inside. And then I put a tiny bit of super glue right here on this one, and a little bit on this side. Not too much, because super glue tends to crystallize and spread into the mechanics, and then it's going to start interfering with the electronics. So just a tiny, tiny bit. And then I pushed this pin down more than is possible with a screw. So now it's somewhere down here within this part, right? So you can almost say that I forced it down to a 4th or a 5th setting. So it's super stiff, and it stays down there because of the super glue. So that removed just a little more of the dead zone than just having it on the tightest setting. And I know that I'm never going to be satisfied with just the tightest setting, because I run super high thumbsticks, and I want them to be very, very stiff. It's just, I don't know how I got to that point, but it's like twice the length of a one you would consider heightened, almost. So anyway, that didn't bother me. And if you're like me, you like a very, very stiff thumbstick, then this is for you. If you don't, if you like it loose, then you can't do this, because you can never undo it. Not even with acetone or something else. You're just gonna damage the electronics trying to get it up again. It's gonna be down there like forever. So your right thumbstick is always gonna be that stiff, unless you unsolder this entire part and switch it for a new one. I've also seen some tutorials online, not for this controller, but others, where they actually do unsolder this one, take it apart, and then change this little spring to a stiffer one. And I guess that could work for this one as well. I don't know. I don't know how it looks inside. I wouldn't really recommend it if you're not a pro on these controllers, because you might just end up ruining it. So leave that to the pros, and when the tutorials come out, then maybe you can do that if you know how to solder. But this is an easy, inexpensive way of just getting rid of a little bit extra of the dead zone. Now it still has a little bit of that gap, it does, but now I would describe it as what you might expect of a Series 1 controller before you did that little trick, you know, where you put a little bit of tape on top of this before you pushed this down to remove any dead zone. That was super effective, loved it. Now you can't do that anymore, but it's still, now if you do this, it's still as good as a regular controller before you do anything to it. So it's just fine. Now I love the controller in all other possible ways, but that thing just bugged me, so I tore it open and I pushed it down with a little bit of glue so it was super tight. And now it feels much better. Now what I've also done on top of that, and this is almost something that could deserve its own video. I showed you this before. This is my thumbstick. It's very high, right? Now if I just have it like that, the leverage that comes from having such a long stick is gonna make the thumbstick feel like spaghetti anyways, right? So I have created, and this is my latest version, I've experimented with a lot, this makes the thumbstick 2 or 3 times stiffer, at least this one with this spring. You can use another spring that is not as stiff and, you know, just add a little bit of tension. Any way you want it, actually. But this seems to be the best way. Instead of a metal spring, you can use foam or a very soft rubber or something like that. But spring is the best option for one obvious reason. When you turn, or when you push the thumbstick to the sides, there's no bulk of material that builds up and hinders, you know, the thumbstick from going all the way, because that might otherwise be a problem. And that is also the reason why I have a ring below. That ring is actually large enough so that it covers the ceramic part, right? Otherwise, what's the point? You're just putting tension on the bottom plate and then the upper part of the thumbstick. That's not going to make it stiffer. It's just going to make it want to pop off. So this is just like a small disc below. Then you have the spring inside, which I actually got from a notebook. Works very well. Just make sure that this is smooth so it doesn't get caught on the edges. And just make sure that the spring has a diameter wide enough to accommodate the thumbstick, and actually a little bit more than that. Especially the disc on the bottom should have a bit more than that, because when the thumbstick is tilted, then it's gonna need a little bit more space in this direction, right? So have a little bit of a wider diameter in the hole in the bottom. I actually added a ring to the top, and if you would remove that one, the spring would actually come up quite a bit. I added these because I didn't want it to push the thumbstick off of the controller. But that depends on what kind of spring you're using, right? So this works awesomely for me. I know I already have quite a stiff thumbstick. As I told you, it's more than the highest setting, but I need more. I do. And I'm guessing that's just because I'm such a shitty FPS player that I need every possible thing to help me out here. But if you're like me, you like them very stiff, then this is a great, inexpensive way. So that is now about 3 times as stiff as you have ever felt an Xbox controller, an Xbox thumbstick be. So it's very stiff. It's very high, and it just gives me a little bit of an advantage when I'm playing FPS games. And honestly, I think it looks kind of cool from some angles, at least. If you want to know more about this one, because it's kind of awesome, just write a comment below and I'll try to answer as fast as I can when I see it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this part, of course, helps with removing the feeling of the dead zone. Now, the actual mechanical problem below, the design flaw, is not going to disappear just because you make this part stiffer, but it feels more rigid. So at least that's a good feeling when you're playing. So adding the tiny little fix inside with the glue, and this one, now for having such a high thumbstick, the dead zone should be much bigger, but it's not. It's just as much as this regular one that I haven't actually done anything to. So there you go. That's one way of removing part of the dead zone. A little bit more of that gap disappears. So it's a bit better, a bit stiffer. And if you add this one, much stiffer, which is nice. All right, I've been rambling on for too long. Sorry about my English. Honestly, I'm from Sweden, so just deal with it. And I'll see you out there playing Halo or Call of Duty or whatever. Take it easy.